Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I think one of the most beautiful places in all of Mississauga, some people call it the jewel of Mississauga, is Riverwood Conservancy. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit at the end of this program about a gentleman that got me really involved in Riverwood, the former chair who passed away about a month or two ago, Kevin Sherwin. But before we do that, I want to introduce you to the executive director of Riverwood Conservancy, and very impressive young lady who's got unbelievable background, and talk a little bit about both her and Riverwood, and then most importantly, what she wants to achieve at Riverwood. So I want you to welcome Sarah Wilbur Collins to the show. Sarah, how are you?
I'm well, thanks, Brian. How are you doing?
Very well. Thank you so much. So you've got a pretty impressive background. You came to Riverwood, in June, I understand. And before that, you were with the Grand River Conservation Foundation, where you were the executive director for 12 years. And before that, you were the director of development there. And before that, you were with the Nature Conservancy of Canada. And before that, you were with the YMCA. You've got a Master of Conservation Leadership from the University of Guelph, and a certificate in sustainable local food. That sounds interesting. And another diploma in workplace mental health leadership certificate. What a fascinating background you've got. So tell me, what attracted you to Riverwood?
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for that introduction. I've never felt more impressed in my life. Well, what attracted me to Riverwood? The very first time I was at Riverwood was the very day that the global pandemic was declared. And I was there at a meeting of a third party. We had very generously been invited. And I remember looking at this absolutely stunning set of gardens and the gorgeous landscape in absolute wonderment that such a place could exist in Mississauga. And, as I went indoors, little did I know that, the beautiful home of Mr. Parker at Chapel House would ultimately have to be closed for the pandemic. And at the time I sat and reflected and thought, this is a place I could really see myself getting involved in. It's got a little bit of everything. And the people there that I saw were so engaged in their own activities. It was wonderful.
And so what then got you the job? When did you start interviewing with them, and why were you attracted?
Well, I put in my resume, and it was about April when I first started having interviews, and it was really interesting, because conservation and gardens is such an in-person kind of a thing. But of course, with the pandemic, I had to have all of my interviews on Zoom. So it felt a little bit separated from the reality of being on site. But it was fantastic to meet such a dedicated board of directors. And I do want to acknowledge the huge role that Kevin Sherwin, our past chair, had in orienting me and helping me along before his unfortunate passing in August. And one of the things that got me really excited about the Riverwood Conservancy is, behind all of the various things you just introduced me as, I actually started my career as a musician. I have a degree in music.
Oh, really? So, I missed that.
Yeah, I do. Way back when. And so one of the things that really got me excited, in addition to the conservation aspects, was the whole idea of how we can animate the space. How can we make Riverwood a place where people come for lots of different reasons. And we do have the Driftwood Theatre Company from time to time, and music as well in the before times, I'm told. So that's something that I'm
well.
Really
and one of the things that Kevin introduced was, with a lot of help from the board and other people, was the big jazz gala in June under the stars, which was just been wonderful. I had the opportunity to MC that, I think, twice, and it was
fantastic. Yeah. And so, when I began here, it was an absolute perfect time, because we were just starting to come out of lockdowns and everybody had a lot of energy behind them. And we're really passionate about getting out and seeing each other too, not just seeing Riverwood itself, but seeing each other and getting together in the gardening groups and the conservation and stewardship groups. To be able to kind of make a difference again. Yeah.
So let's just, for a couple of seconds, talk about Riverwood from a location standpoint, because a lot of people in Mississauga, if I mention Riverwood, have no idea where it is. Tell us where it is.
Oh, it's true. So it's on Burnham Thorpe. It's in the heart of Mississauga, right along the Credit River. So Riverwood itself is 150 acres, mostly forested, but we do have our beautiful McEwen Terrace garden and our chapel lawns that are just at the top of the property. So you can enjoy the gardens and horticulture up at the top of the hill, or you can go down the trail to the riverside. And if you like to fish, you can do that. And if you like to just sit on a bench and enjoy the outdoors, you can do that as well.
And it was bought by the city of Mississauga from someone that had a house on the property. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Riverwood's actually an assemblage of 4 parcels of land, but 2 of them, were purchased from the Parker and the McEwen families over time. And so that's a legacy that came into place originally, actually, as the Mississauga Garden Council. And then in 2008, the name was changed to Riverwood. And here we are.
And the property goes all the way from Burnham Thorpe north to the 403. And is bordered on the eastern side by the GO train tracks and Arundel GO train station. And then on the west by the Credit River.
That's exactly it. Yeah. So lots of different ways to look at Riverwood. Depends on what kind of activity you like.
That's it. I got to tell you honestly that most of the people I tell about how wonderful Riverwood is, and they're trying to figure out the location, I tell them about that big green statue at the front, and that's how they recognize it. Tell us about that big green statue. What do you know about it?
Oh my gosh. Well, that was put in place in, I believe it was 2017. As a commemoration. So that's something that's really been iconic, and it's the way to tell where Riverwood is. You're absolutely right. It's, it was, and I can't remember the fellow's name who actually created it, but it was installed as a pine sanctuary. That's the name of the sculpture. Yeah. So it's just an artist's interpretation of a pine sanctuary.
I always thought it looked more like a sea creature and thought it'd be better off.
I did stand underneath it as part of my orientation at Riverwood and got a picture. So that was fun.
We're chatting tonight with Sarah Wilbur Collins. She is the executive director of the Riverwood Conservancy in Mississauga. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Sarah in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight about Riverwood Conservancy with the new executive director who's joined us tonight, Sarah Wilbur Collins. She's got a really incredible background. She came from Grand River Conservation Foundation. Tell us, Sarah, where's Grand River?
Grand River Conservation Foundation is actually based in Cambridge, but the watershed of the Grand River, it's actually pretty big. It runs from kind of roughly Mount Forest all the way down to Lake Erie. So I sometimes say I used to work in a Lake Erie watershed, so I have a home river, and now I have a work river, which is Lake Ontario, which is where the Credit River ends up.
And so the Conservancy for Grand River was the whole Grand River, the whole watershed.
It was for the whole watershed. Yeah, and we did work very similar to what we do at the Riverwood Conservancy, support for outdoor education programs, trails, reforestation, those kinds of things. But in my case at Grand River, it was for the entire watershed. Lots of diversity.
It goes through Brantford.
It does.
Paris. Does it go through Cambridge?
It goes through Cambridge. That's right. It goes through Kitchener-Waterloo. And actually some of the tributaries of the Grand go through Guelph as well.
Does it go all the way up to Elora?
And higher too. Yeah, Elora is a great place if you want to catch brown trout, actually.
Well, that must have been a really interesting position for you.
Yeah, it was. I've always enjoyed the diversity of the work, and the Grand River watershed is pretty different depending on where you access it. If you can picture Elora, as you've said in your mind's eye, it's a trickle with a great big waterfall at the top of it. But at the mouth of the Grand River, there's commercial shipping and commercial fishing. So it's if you go on a canoe ride there, it's like paddling around your living room. There's not much current. Yeah,
well, I've had dinner beside the Grand River in Elora, in Cambridge. Yeah. In Paris, and I guess maybe even in Brantford, but never farther south than that. So I don't even have any idea where it goes from Brantford down to Lake Erie.
Yeah, it goes down through Caledonia and through Cayuga, adjacent to the Six Nations Reserve, and then on its way through Dunnville and down. And by that point, it's quite wide. It's probably 5 or 6 times the width in Elora and quite a bit deeper as well.
Really wonderful. What did you do for Grand? What was one of your bigger accomplishments?
Yeah, well, I headed up the charitable foundation. So I worked with the board of directors to do fundraising and promotion primarily. One of the biggest things that we did was support for the outdoor education program there, because I was there at a time where there were some cuts going on through the provincial government to outdoor education. And one of the things that we really mobilized was, oh my gosh, the heart of the environment is the little kids. The kids are out there turning over rocks and running around and forming connections. And if you pull the outdoor education program, you don't have that kind of basic farm team, I guess, in order to help protect the environment for future generations. And so we fought like mad and got that funding restored. But we also, to create a bridge, we also raised about $2 million for outdoor education programs and also facilities too, because we had 5 nature centers. And a big offering, 50,000 kids every year went through Grand River Nature Centers.
Kids.
Yeah, 50,000 kids. It was pretty amazing. I have my home nature center that I grew up in because I was born and raised in Brantford. That was the Abs Mill Nature Center. But, my kids went to other ones within the watershed as well. So, yeah, that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited about the Riverwood Conservancy.
Tell us this morning your ambitions for Riverwood.
Oh, well, I think that outdoor education connection is so vital. Just this morning, I was out with a homeschool class running around in the dirt, and they were having a fantastic time. And that's where it's all about. I think for Riverwood as a whole, I really want to see Riverwood take a really strong place in the community and really reflect the diversity of our community. Riverwood is, just as you say, it's not always known, and you kind of have to get to it. And I think that there are some really great opportunities that have been created through the pandemic as well, to be able to kind of get outside and interact and do some really good outreach so that people know about us and people understand, yes, you can come to Riverwood for things, but, we also have the ability to come to you and share the information that we have as well.
I think for me, if I had to think about 3 of the big wonders of Riverwood, one would be the gardens, and the gardens are spectacular. And I don't know whether you do it often, but certainly for that jazz gala, you lit them all up at night, and so the beautiful flowers in the gardens, but then lit as well, ended up being absolutely spectacular. I think the second thing would be the forest, and you talked about how much of Riverwood is forested. And I've, on numerous occasions with my dog, gone on different hikes on different trails, both down the hill, which is more than a hill. It's almost a cliff. And it's quite treacherous. And sometimes on the walkway and sometimes sliding mud down the side. And then also up, to the area that's, I guess an old farmer's field toward the 403. After you pass through the woods. And it's just a beautiful place to roam around. And there's, I guess, not only the main valley for the Credit River, but there's a couple of other very steep valleys and little tributaries that come off that are really quite treacherous and exciting and fun. And then you've got trails running up and down and along. And then I think the third is the Credit River, which right there is quite wide and powerful.
Yeah, that's one of my big things on my to-do list next spring is to take a paddle down the Credit River and see Riverwood and the lands from the perspective of the river, which would have been, how the Parkers saw it, and before that, the Indigenous peoples of the area. So I think it would be absolutely fantastic to see that.
So how do we get more people to come and hike around Riverwood?
Well, what's interesting is that we've probably since the pandemic doubled our numbers. It's become really, really clear that people need places to go. They need them, to interact with the environment, to feel better, after all of this pandemic stuff. What I think we really need is to be able to engage better as a Riverwood Conservancy with the people that are there. Every once in a while we run into somebody who comes to the park on a regular basis, but still doesn't know about us. And so, we've done a lot of work around just being present on the site. Introduced a Trail Ambassadors program this year where we have staff and volunteers who just literally walk the trails, and hear what people have to say in the moment that they're experiencing it. So, that feedback can be anything from, oh, this is a great mountain biking place, all the way through to, I want to have my wedding here. Can I do that? And, oh my gosh, poison ivy, can we get rid of that? So that kind of thing, getting people who are on the site engaged in the programs that we offer, that makes it less of a passive experience and more of an impactful experience, I think, and one that people will be more inclined to share, I think.
Do you hold weddings at Riverwood?
We don't actually hold weddings at Riverwood, but there's wedding photography, and it happens very regularly. But sometimes I've seen 3 and 4 at the same time. Yeah.
And what's your relationship with visual arts, Mississauga?
Visual Arts Mississauga is sort of our partner charity that's on the site, and we do some co-programming with them on the artistic side. Actually, we also deliver a program for students called Art Naturally, which is essentially sketching in the woods, sketching along the trails, and that's something that's really been valued by the young people there. So, as we think about how to animate the space after the pandemic, we're really starting to think together about, the beauty of the woods, the beauty of the gardens, and how that can be translated to both of our institutions.
I've always loved the McMichael Gallery and the combination of the art, the outdoor statue garden, as well as the conservation area. I've always thought that, the conservation area would be just another conservation area if it wasn't for McMichael Gallery. And McMichael Gallery would not be a great gallery if it wasn't for the fact that it was built on the hill of that conservation area. And while I loved going through the Group of Seven collection inside, I love the statues and the outdoor art outside. Are there any lessons learned or things that you could use from McMichael and apply to Riverwood?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that we're going to be looking at as time goes on is how to offer both free programs, that benefit the whole community and getting to the community, but also, some of the programs that the McMichael offers as well, just in terms of, education on the property and education on the landscape as well. I used to live in Toronto, and I have some very fond memories of going up to the McMichael, just like you said, with my dog. And, putting him in the car and then going inside and enjoying the gift shop, enjoying the various amenities that are there as well. So I think that there are some lessons that we can learn. And because the McMichael is also fairly similar to Riverwood in terms of the way it's surrounded by urbanization and by residences. That's something we're paying attention to, along with, the High Park Nature Center and a few others that have similar challenges to us.
I used to be chairman of the Mississauga Summit, and we hired an supposed expert in these kinds of places. And they said one of the keys of the McMichael Gallery is that you had the outdoor, the indoor art, and a block away you had a coffee shop and a restaurant and some shops. And she was explaining that people want nature and art, but they want to have that shopping and food and beverage experience as well. And they used another example, which I liked mainly because I used to live there, but they used Ambleside in West Vancouver, which is half, if you go walking around, it's half on the beach in nature and half walking on Marine Drive in commercial through restaurants, coffee shops, or retail. One of the things lacking at Riverwood is a place to get a coffee, a place to sit down and relax and put your feet up and stuff like that. Is there any opportunity for that kind of an establishment at Riverwood?
Oh, it's funny you say that, Brian, because during the pandemic, when I came into the office, they said no coffee. I said, oh my gosh, where do I get a coffee? There may be in our future. It's this sort of thing where we really want to make sure that whatever we do offer in terms of programs and services, it's really balanced and we get it right off the bat. So that's something as we move into kind of our next strategic plan and we think about fee for services and what the public really wants, there may be an opportunity there. I'm still getting to know the restaurants and so on around Riverwood now, but that road is yet before me. So,
well, you think about the success and the sort of the image of Tavern on the Green in Central Park, or the Tea House in Stanley Park, or even the restaurant in the middle of High Park. Some of my favorite places are in the middle of parks, and they end up getting great reputations and become almost the center square of whatever the park they're in.
And nothing's worse than if you've got two kids with you and they're both grumpy because they're hungry.
Practical reasons to think about it too. Okay,
yes.
So you didn't like my first suggestion. How about this one? I've always wondered why there's not some way to get from the Arundel GO train station or even better, the parking lot into Riverwood, because you got this massive parking lot. And, on numerous occasions, I've gone to Riverwood to walk my dog on a nice sunny day or something like that. And the parking lot's been packed. And you've got this big, massive parking lot, right there at the GO train station. And, how many other parks in this world have got transit to its front door? Actually, the problem is it's a side door with no door that opens. So how do you connect to either the Arundel GO or to the Arundel GO parking lot?
Yeah, absolutely. I've experienced that as well a couple of times where I thought, hey, wait a minute, I work here and I can get a parking spot. What's going on? Yeah, the Arundel Go Station is just up the way. It's probably 300 meters. And thankfully, it's close to the mouth of our green trail, which is maybe even, I'm going to say 100 meters away. So on certain occasions, we have either used the Arundel Go Station as a extra parking or run shuttles from it. I'm sure you're familiar with that in our soiree and a few other events that have occurred in the past. These are again options that are yet before us, but parking it's funny how, you can spend a lot of time on your mission, which is, bringing nature to the community, but the bugaboos are always something like parking, aren't they? They're always something like that.
A tunnel under the Go or a bridge over the Go.
Well, these are options. I wonder if anybody from Go is listening. Maybe we can take that up in discussion.
Well, they should get some environmental credits for that and some credos for doing that if they're thinking about it. One of the other things that people have talked about is whether there's an opportunity to put a museum or some other building, some facility at Riverwood. Have you given any thought to that?
Yeah, there was a notion of a visitor center for a period of time, for sure. There are some discussions going on with VAM, with others around, what does the space look like? How can we make best use of the space together? So that discussion's ongoing, because we really do want to be able to, after COVID and when we can all be together again safely, kind of look at how to use the space, because it's changed, hasn't it? It's really changed the way we think about space. And so, right now we're focused outside, but we have been thinking a little bit about indoors, and I'm sure that discussion will continue as we start to get back to whatever normal may be. I'm not sure that we'll ever go back to the same amount of space for staff in the same way. Many of our staff are working remotely, but we are looking at the idea of green retreats and bringing more corporate teams on into the conservation and stewardship program, so that they can take part actively on the land, and that might include meetings and settings like that.
I love the trails that go down the hill. Are you building more of them, or are you sort of have the number of trails you built been sort of maximized?
Right now, we've got our sanctioned trails, which are red, yellow, and green trails. And what we're really actually taking a look at, because the property has been so well used during the pandemic, is which trails we may need to just take a look at. Sometimes we use the term unsanctioned trails because they don't have a color attached to them, red, yellow, or green. But we have found that because of the slopes and those kinds of things, that there are some areas that we actually have to be a little bit careful about, because if you've got, for example, somebody on a wagon or with wheels intersecting the main trails at a right angle, you could have a bit of a ding on your hands. So there are a few areas where we're taking a couple of these unsanctioned trails offline for the moment to restore them, and to take a look at how we can sort of increase the natural values in some of those areas, because they have been pretty banged down during the pandemic. And you can't fault anybody for that. That's just people wanting to be outside. I do the same thing.
It is interesting that you've got this garden that is manicured and kept and planted, I presume, and things like that. And then you've got this, the vast majority of the place that's just natural wilderness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What a great opportunity, right? When I first came to the property, after I was hired for this job, I brought a forester friend along with me, primarily because he's my big resource on what I've always fallen down in the area of tree identification, and I'm happy to be public about that. But one of the things that he said to me was, you've got healthy ash trees down here. You don't see healthy ash trees very often because of the emerald ash borer, which you might have heard of, urban tree, and city of Mississauga and many, many other municipalities have simply taken down ash trees. Well, we've got them at Riverwood, and they're healthy. We've got red oaks that are enormous. This is a legacy of a public property that hasn't been cut. That is extremely exciting, So you can tell I get really cranked on forest ecosystems just as much as a lot of people get cranked on garden systems. But that's the key, isn't it, to Riverwood? It's just lots of different kinds of things for lots of different kinds of people and all of their interests. And that piece, I think, ultimately will make us, a really great provider of nature for all of the community.
One of my favorite places in Riverwood isn't actually in Riverwood. But I got to tell you, and probably I shouldn't say this because then too many people are going to do it and it's going to become unsafe. But the bridge across the Credit River, the Burnhamthorpe Bridge across the Credit River, has got these little, I think there's 3 or 4 little oval lookout spots where you can stop and look at the Credit River down below and look at Riverwood off to the right, and or on the south, looking at Arundel Conservation Area. And it is the vista, because of the height of that bridge and the depth of the valley for the Credit River, it is an absolutely stunning view. And I wish more people had an opportunity to see nature from that vantage point of that lookout on the Burnhamthorpe Bridge.
Oh yeah, because then you get the full perspective and you're high enough that you can see the river, its surroundings, and even a little bit about where it's going on either side. It's funny you mentioned the Burnhamthorpe Bridge because I drive it to get to work every day, but I also spent probably a good hour underneath it 2 days ago, and it was with a group of people taking a tour of the final couple of days of the salmon run that we have on the Credit River. So it was really interesting to hear their perspectives about there's a great big drain down there, and so we talked about water quality because there's that drain feeds right into the Credit River, and it's anything that goes down somebody's grate goes straight into the river. So people are starting now to put little painted fish on the edges of grates so that people understand that if you dump something down that drain, it's going right into the Credit.
We're chatting tonight with Sarah Wilbur Collins, who's the executive director of the Riverwood Conservancy, the hidden gem in the center of Mississauga that doesn't want to be hidden anymore. It wants all of you to come and find it and explore it. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Sarah in just a minute. Stay with us, everybody.
Thanks.
Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Tonight, we're talking about the Riverwood Conservancy, which is this garden conservation area right in the middle of Mississauga at Burnhamthorpe and the Credit River, right beside the Arundel GO train station. It's just a beautiful, spectacular place. And our guest tonight is Sarah Wilbur Collins, who's the executive director, newly installed executive director of Riverwood. Sarah, tell us about some of the programs that you got coming up, some of the events coming up that might be the reasons why people might want to come and check you out.
Oh, absolutely. The summertime's big for green trees and gardens. The fall is no less exciting. We've noticed actually the leaves are turning a little bit later this year, which is kind of interesting. And we are in the midst of our Bioblitz, our Semiannual Bioblitz, which is sponsored by Climate Impact. This is a chance for the public to come in and using the iNaturalist app on their phone to help out with our species counts. So we have identified so far over 300 species at Riverwood, mostly fungi, mostly mushrooms and things on the ground, which is great. Everybody loves a good mushroom. And we're headed into our final weekend now. So
how many of those mushrooms are edible?
I know that's a good question. That's a question I had to myself too. We mostly got stuck on the pun. The fungi are liked by fun guys. We didn't really get past that. That's okay. But it's a really great opportunity for the public to get involved. And so that's on until the 31st of October. And that will really helps people get an idea of what the local plants, flora and fauna are, but also to help inform some of the work that we're doing on managing Riverwood as well. Then we've got our Halloween webinar, Creepy Crawlies and Nighttime Nature, which will be on October the 31st. You can turn off your lights and learn some about the spooky creatures of Riverwood that come out after dark if you're in the mood to be not scared, but maybe thrilled a little bit. Lots of bats at Riverwood. When's that? That's October 31st from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. That's actually that's an online webinar. So you can find out more on our website, which is the riverwoodconservancy.org, and there's an events section on the website. But we're continuing our programming partly virtually and partly in person. Obviously, more people are, as they feel more comfortable, starting to come back to Riverwood. But there are still a lot of people who just want to take part in a virtual event, and we're really happy about that. That has really expanded our audience. And I heard today that we've had people dial in from Serbia and from Louisiana and from all over the place to learn about Riverwood. Yeah, really exciting. So, you can take a fall hike for real, or you can take a virtual fall hike with our Dave Taylor, who's our guide.
Fantastic. What about wintertime?
Wintertime, we've got lots of different things going on. There are there's holiday programming, and then you've got programs typically that involve things like seed collecting or gentle walks. Sometimes snowshoeing, although I'm not sure we've advanced that far just yet. But conservation is a 4-season thing, and a lot of people think spring and summer, but it is a 4-season thing. So we're looking forward to bringing that to the community.
Excellent. And do you have any sugaring off in the spring?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, maple syrup. That's a special time when you get kids in the machine and the steam and everything else. So yeah.
Some of my most favorite times at Riverwood have frankly been sunny winter days. And I'm always amazed how many people want to come out and just walk around nature on a sunny winter day and get bundled up and enjoy the slope and the trails.
Oh, I remember, and this was early in my career when I was working with Grand River. We had a day, we had an event at one of our conservation areas, and it was minus 33, but it was sunny. Minus 33 in the morning, like, oh. And we were expecting 600. I think we had twice that. It was absolutely incredible for the very reason you described. We had cool activities, and that's the thing. But there's no such thing as bad weather. There's just inappropriate clothing. Come to Riverwood in appropriate clothing.
So why do you think Riverwood is the hidden gem?
Oh, I think that the idea that people have to come to us is something that we really need to address. I think that Riverwood as people, as a part of the community, I think we can do a lot more to come to the community and show people what they can do to interact with their nature. It's not just our nature, it's all of our nature. And I think that might be one of the challenges is just, we maybe haven't been as proud as we could be about some of our projects, because I think we have a lot to be proud of. And I could say that as a person who's joined only a few months ago. That was what made me want to come to Riverwood, is the idea that, it's a beautiful spot, but it's also a spot we can share in lots of different ways. And so that's something I'm really looking forward to doing.
I think you've got an unbelievable opportunity because it really is a gem. But you got to get rid of the hidden part of it. You got to get the gem that people want to go to. I'm convinced that it could and should be the place where, everyone wants to take visiting family or visiting tourists or whatnot. And I'm reminded of a seminar I went to. I was president of the Mississauga Arts Council at once in the past, and I went to this seminar in New York about it was for lots of different charitable organizations, art organizations, conservation areas, gardens, etc. And they said that the secret to success was becoming a place that was so important to the identity of the city that you couldn't think of the city without thinking about that place. And they used as the example Central Park. And, you can't think about New York without thinking about Central Park. But they also used the example of, Times Square and the theater district, which similarly, and from an industrial or artistic standpoint, sort of identifies New York. And then they use Stanley Park as another example. And then they said, think about your own city and what are you known for that you can't think of Mississauga without thinking of. And Riverwood wouldn't be in that list, regrettably.
No,
not yet. Might be.
But if you think about the lake as the river as a system, I think that there's a real opportunity, to make sure we're interacting with the lands at Arundel. If you go all the way up the river, that's a spot that, for example, the Credit Valley Trail, and we're involved with them. There are great opportunities to link. Like everybody loves a riverside trail, and there's no particular reason why you should have to stop because you're changing conservation property. So that's a real opportunity. In fact, I heard someone say a couple of weeks ago that if you linked up all of the open properties, conservation properties along the Credit River, that it would be as big or bigger than Central Park in New York.
Well, I love
that's no small thing. That's exciting.
I actually made a presentation to the board of Riverwood at one point in time at the invitation of Kevin Sherwin, where I said exactly that.
Oh, maybe that's where it came from.
if you added up the acreage of the Arundel Conservation Area, which by the way goes from Dundas to Burnhamthorpe on both sides of the Credit River, with Riverwood Conservancy that goes from Burnhamthorpe to effectively the 403, with the Pinchin Farms, which are on the other side of the 403, also owned publicly, you would have something bigger than Central Park. And think about that. Does Arundel Conservation Area, Riverwood, and Pinchin Farms in any way, shape, or form, equate with Central Park and the importance of Central Park to Manhattan? And regrettably, it doesn't. But it was interesting because you had a member of your board that was from U of T, an environmental professor from U of T, that got really mad at me and said, "You're wrong, Brian. You're completely wrong. You're missing something critically important. Because if you add into what you just said, the contiguous acreage of UTM, you would actually have a site bigger than Stanley Park in Vancouver."
Ha! Well said for him.
But isn't that interesting?
Well, what is really interesting to me actually is I want to make sure that Riverwood is a critical part of our community vitality. That we are contributing to the city in a really meaningful way, and that we are a part of, for example, organizations' recruitment strategies. Why do I want to come to Mississauga? Well, I'll tell you why. Because there's this absolutely fantastic organization that not only has a beautiful property, but is also working to engage people out and beyond that. Why does U of T attract students? Well, it's because of that, Stanley Park size area that's on the river. Mississauga, and to some extent, does have a reputation for being a highly urbanized area. And we are a magnificent counter to that, I think.
So I, as an April Fool's joke, one year announced on Facebook that I was going to be running for regional chair, and one of the policies that I had was that I wanted to have a chairlift or a gondola that would go from the Erin Mills GO train station to Riverwood, and then across the Credit River to UTM as a way of getting all the UTM students to UTM, but also because I thought that if you had a gondola that went across the Credit River from Riverwood to UTM, everyone that ever wanted to come to Mississauga would want to ride that gondola. It was completely, obviously, done in jest, and it was because someone was recommending a gondola at the same time on the city of Toronto Islands. I got to tell you, there were a whole bunch of people that took me seriously and didn't think it was a joke. Thought it was a great idea.
Well, you know what? It's startling when you see orthophotography and you see Riverwood from heights. It's really, really noticeable. And I can only think that when you've got the sparkling water and the beautiful leaves and just the dynamic movement, one of my favorite moments in my previous career was seeing the Grand River from a helicopter, and just that, oh my gosh, now I see, how important this place is because I have the overall context. It's literally the 10,000 foot view.
Well, if you haven't walked across the Burnhamthorpe Bridge yet and looked at it from that lookout that I mentioned, do that, because it's not like a helicopter, but it's almost as good. And it's a spectacular spot to stop and watch. If people want to check you out on the internet, how do they do that? And if they want to donate and participate, how do they do that?
Absolutely. So our website is www.theriverwoodconservancy.org. And if you go on there, you'll be able to see our various education programs, our various gardens, what's on our blog. And then there's a big old to donate link right on the upper right-hand corner. So we're a membership and volunteer-based organization. If that's something that makes you passionate, we can find a way to get you involved.
And some of these galas that you've done in the past, are you going to be holding them again virtually maybe, or what are you going to be doing?
Yeah, we're taking a look at that right now, actually. Yeah, we've been looking at things like smaller scale things like movie nights and yoga and so forth. And we've got to work our way up during pandemic safety, but certainly always looking for ways to engage people in new ways on fundraising and also just getting people out on the site for events. Well,
in the past, you've had an annual gala, I think in the wintertime, and then you've had a big springtime gala jazz event outside in the summertime and in June. And everyone listening, if you get a chance to go to any Riverwood gala, you got to go. It's just a spectacular time. It's a beautiful place. And I do think that there are some incredible opportunities that you've got, Sarah, to make a huge stamp on not only Riverwood, but to Mississauga, because I do think that that with the right actions over time and participation and contribution from not only the city government, but from more importantly, the people of Mississauga, you could be as important to the heart of Mississauga. When you think about it, you really are. Well, maybe not the heart, the lungs, given the nature. And you're right there in the center of Mississauga along the Credit River. You could be so critically important to Mississauga, and you already are, but you could be even more so.
Well, I'm certainly, building on the work of some pretty amazing people who started it all off, including Kevin. So, really grateful that we've gotten as far as we have. And I agree, there's a huge amount of energy and a huge amount of interest. So really looking forward to the future.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about Kevin Sherwin, who was the former chair of the board of Riverwood Conservancy after the break. He was the gentleman that got me involved in Riverwood and a wonderful friend. So after this break, we're going to come back and talk a little bit about Kevin Sherwin, the former chair of Riverwood, who passed away this past summer. But Sarah Wilbur Collins, congratulations on your appointment. I look forward to seeing you in action and some of the things that you're going to bring to Mississauga and Riverwood. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks very much for having me, Brian. Appreciate it.
After the break, Kevin Sherwin. A little bit of my own eulogy. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio on Saga 960. I wanted to end this show on Riverwood Conservancy with a little bit of a tribute to Kevin Sherwin. Kevin Sherwin passed away in August a few months ago at the age of 58. Way too young for him to go. Kevin was born in Edmonton, grew up in Edmonton and then in Mississauga, and really dedicated, in addition to his time in work where he was in marketing and sales, and an incredible amount of time that he spent with his parents. And he was a devoted son to his mother and his father. And after his father passing to his mother, he spent an incredible amount of time committed to the community, probably more time committed to the community than almost anyone else I've ever met. I got to know him both when I was chair of the Mississauga Summit, and then even more so when I was president of the Mississauga Arts Council, because he came to everything I invited him to. He was unbelievably responsive, supportive. He was interested, and I think some of it was because he wanted me to come and promote the Riverwood entities, and so there was no question a little bit of mutuality and reciprocity, but he did it in such a nice way. And anytime I called him up and asked him if he wanted to come to an event, come to a speech, come to a presentation, sit at my table, buy a ticket, Kevin was there. And not only was there, he was unbelievably generous in the way he would meet people, greet people, make them feel at home, etc. And then he got very involved in the Mississauga Arts Council and some of our organization, and got us doing more work with Riverwood Conservancy, where I found out he had been a board member and then vice chair and then chairman of the board for I think 5 terms or something like that, longer than anyone had stayed before, and beyond what the Constitution allowed. They actually had to change to allow him, because they all wanted him to stay longer. He was, I think, associated with Riverwood for something like 11 years on their board and as chair of their board, and was unbelievably committed to making Riverwood an important piece, a critically important piece of what Mississauga is all about. He loved the flowers. He loved the wildlife. He loved the wilderness of Riverwood. He would often take pictures of him wandering around. He would often ask me if I wanted to come walk the dog. He would invite me to an event or just for a coffee. Or tell me, where are you? You should be at this art exhibit, or where are you? You should be walking your dog on our big dog thing. And I get this appeal in the middle of an event saying, I got to come. He was that kind of guy that not only led at the boardroom table, but just led with his own personal style, his own magnanimous way of making people feel welcome. Known for big bear hugs. Known for sitting down and having a good glass of wine. We became good friends. He took me to the opera. We ended up going out for wonderful steak dinners. He liked his red wine. He liked to talk. He liked to talk about politics. He liked to talk about economics. He liked to talk about Riverwood and what we could do. And he had always had suggestions for me for the Mississauga Summit or for the Mississauga Arts Council, or for politics or whatever else I was involved in. He was an interesting guy. We ended up getting together often for breakfast at a favorite place on here, Ontario, that Orchard Family Restaurant that's been around, I think, for 50 years or more. And we would have pea meal bacon and eggs. And he would know, if not half the place, at least, 20% or 25% of the people in attendance, and certainly behind the counter. The owner, the chef, were personal friends of his. He would often be at the counter with some politician, Hazel McCallion or someone, having breakfast. And if I was there with someone else, he would sit down and join us and share a cup of coffee. We often went to Summit Garden, favorite Chinese restaurant at Winston Churchill in Dundas, and we'd have dim sum at lunch, and we'd have wonderful conversations. And then he got me involved in working on a charitable fundraising committee for a big charitable event that Summit had for Riverwood. And it was one of the better gigs I've ever had, because all I had to do was come up with some ideas and invite some people. I ended up not emceeing, but at least emceeing the auction portion of the night. And in exchange, once every 2 weeks, I got invited to lunch at Summit Gardens, and they were testing out the menus on us, and we had this incredible food. Kevin did like his food. He did like his red wine. But he was also a big fan of an Italian restaurant, Massimo Capra's Kitchen down in Clarkson. He loved the keg. We often went to different kegs for steak, often involving a buddy of mine, Steve Cox, and the three of us would go out. Dan Badanis for breakfast and dim sum. Kevin Sherwin was a friend. He was a mentor. He was a supportive individual. He was a community guy. He loved Riverwood and nature and what Riverwood could be. He was a big idea thinker and what Riverwood could end up being and what it can contribute to Mississauga. Mississauga and Riverwood have lost a star, have lost a heart, have lost a big supporter in Kevin Sherwin, and hopefully other people can pick up his example and be as critically important to the community as Kevin was. Kevin, we're going to miss you. I'm going to miss you. I'm going to miss going for breakfast with you. I'm going to miss going for dim sum with you. I'm going to miss walking around Riverwood with you. I'm going to miss you stopping at my house and dropping off red wine or dropping off bagels, which you did on a regular basis, sitting out on my back patio and shooting the breeze. Kevin Sherwin was one of those most special people. Kevin Sherwin, rest in peace. We loved you. That's our show for tonight, everyone. His family, Kevin Sherwin's family, when he passed away, asked instead of flowers or anything like that to give donations to Riverwood Conservancy. And on his obituary, there's a donation page to Riverwood Conservancy. If you're at all interested, please check it out. Thank you. Good night.